Doing a quick roll call, if you can just very briefly introduce yourself. William Clay III.
Present.
Elisa Diamond.
I'm here.
Okay. I know that Sally won't be able to join us, Sally Duncan. Heather has not joined us, Heather Hill. Genevieve Keller.
I'm here.
Chair Lloyd is here. We have Margaret O'Brien. Let me see. Sorry, I keep losing the list. Jelaine Schmidt has not joined us yet. Our new member is Kay Slaughter. Welcome to Miss Slaughter. Dee Dee Smith is here.
Here, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, no, it's fine. Phil Varner is here. Ellen Wagner is here.
Hi.
Jeff should be joining us, Jeff Werner, my colleague. And then Jordy Yeager has not joined us yet, but I have not heard from him.
Okay. Thank you very much for doing that.
Sure. I need to really quickly send a Zoom link to Heather Hill as we're starting the next section of the meeting.
Do you know if we have any people who want to make public comments?
Yes, it looks like we have some hands raised, and I
Great,
can, in a moment. Okay, so really quickly, I'm going to promote Jeff to panelist because for some reason he entered as an attendee. And then hopefully Heather should also have gotten a link to the meeting. Okay, so I guess moving on to the public comment section of the meeting, please raise your hand if you'd like to provide comment. Our comment policy is, just let me find it really quickly. At the beginning of each meeting, not more than 10 minutes will be allowed for the introduction of any guests and public comments. Speakers may speak for a maximum of 2 minutes and shall begin by identifying their name and address. So with that being said, please raise your hand if you'd like to speak. I'm actually not seeing any raised hands, so.
Okay. Okay, so with no public comment at this time, then we can move on to item number 2 of our agenda, which is approval of the agenda. If anyone has any additions they would like to include, otherwise we can take a motion to approve.
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Thank you. I will call a roll call vote. Miss Slaughter, Miss Lloyd.
Approve.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye. Yeah.
Miss Diamond.
Approve.
Mr. Varner.
Yes.
Miss Keller.
I approve.
Miss O'Brien.
Yes.
Miss Wagner.
Yes.
Chair Hill, or Councillor Hill.
Yes.
Sorry. Miss Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Yeager.
I apologize. I just joined in the middle of this. What are we voting on?
Approving the agenda, I think.
Yay.
Yeah. Dr. Clay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Okay, the next item in our agenda is the approval of the meeting notes from the last meeting, from the December 11, 2020 meeting. Does anyone have any comments or suggested revisions, or do we have a motion to approve those?
I move to approve.
I second.
Okay, thank you. Again, calling a roll call vote, Dr. Clay. I assume that's a yes. Ms. Slaughter,
Abstain.
Ms. Lloyd,
Yes.
Ms. Diamond,
Sorry, I want to just ask, is it all right to ask Rachel a question before I vote?
Sure.
Yes.
Along with the approval of honorary street names, I thought we also had a number of recommendations. Did those go under separate cover to council, or I just want to be sure they're captured somewhere?
Yes, those were captured. I did write a letter, and it had 3 sort of attachments or appendices. One was the information about specific recommendations about the actual policy and application. The second was about the specific street nominations, so we covered that. And then there was a third attachment, which included additional related recommendations, such as the recommendation to have a naming committee. And there were some others as well. But
Cool.
your suggestion was definitely included in the letter.
Awesome. And did the rest of the committee get a copy of the letter? And I just am not remembering that.
You know, I should have added that letter as part of this packet, and I'll send it out after this meeting. And then also when I upload the meeting notes to the archive, I can actually add the letter as an attachment to last month's meeting notes.
That would be great. I'll approve them under the condition that that gets added.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Continuing with the vote, Mr. Varner,
Yes.
Ms. Keller,
Aye.
Ms. O'Brien,
Yes.
Ms. Wagner,
Yes.
Ms. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes, I'm going to sneak away for a minute to get my dog in another room.
Okay. And Mr. Yeager.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is a staff update on the Penn Park Cemetery. So it sounds like Jeff or Robert will be sharing that information with us.
I know that, well, hopefully Jeff can hear us and speak to
Can
us.
I'm
I
just
know that- okay.
am I on? Yeah, here, start video.
Yeah, and Jeff, I'm happy to share my screen if there are any images or documents you want to show.
No, I think I circulated the report, oh gosh, probably back in November, and just kind of wanted to follow up and not, and it's 25 minutes, probably not even take close to that amount of time, but where we are, I need to get a plan together. And I'm sorry, I'm like looking at the camera and then looking at my other screen. Maybe I need to just do this and make it easier. There we go. I have, I mean, we know what we have out there. You all have seen the report. I've talked to Shelley Murphy, she's been very helpful, and also been in touch with Tom Chapman at the Historical Society. And, but there's this sort of a next step that I need some help with. And, you know, I guess I would say not quite sure exactly how to congeal this into a plan. So I hesitate to sort of outline a framework, but we know that we have, you know, at least 30 to 40 unmarked graves, which are, I think, beyond a doubt, those of enslaved individuals. We don't know who they are. One of the things that council had asked is that before anything were considered out there, that we do our best to try and contact descendants. I do want to say that the Park and Recs folks have put rope and poles up along the cart path so people can, you know, they can, as they can in the cemetery, they can walk there, but the carts are not allowed there. So what I have is one option is some sort of genealogical research. I mean, that's what Shelley does, but I think she's offered her assistance and guidance, but this may need something where we need to retain a consultant. That's one of the things I was curious what you all think. I had reached out to Jelaine earlier. She had mentioned she had been doing some research on the slave transaction, the records that were recorded in the courthouse, and I was curious when she signs on or hear from her if there's anything in those that might start to give us some clues of some people and names that we can then start to work forward from. And the third piece is sort of this outreach to descendants and doing that in two ways. One is the simply getting this out there and asking people, how does this fit with a family story or a family narrative? But also, if we do identify some individuals who may be descendants, reaching out to them as well. So the idea is, first off, need some sort of a plan. And is this something we can do or internally with you all, or is this something that really needs a consultant to take that next step? So that's sort of the questions I was throwing out there. And now I want to listen. Any ideas, suggestions you guys have? Or questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So remind us, Jeff, what the potential family names are that would have been in that period, that would have lived there in that period.
Yeah, it would have been the Gilmers owned the property from 1870 to 1812. The Craven family, and I'm basing this on the family cemeteries that are there, and presumably those buried outside were related to those two families. That could be entirely wrong. It may well be a burial place that was used during the course of ownership of Penn Park. But the Gilmers, the 1870s to 1812, and the Craven family, 1819 to 1845. There are some other ancillary names that, in-law type and son-in-law names that came into play, and I can circulate those. We have one list, a chancery record from 1804 of a sale of people, quite a few, and that's the list that's in the report. And there's a couple names in there that Shelley thought we might be able to link backwards, but those are kind of toss-up possible assumptions. So, and that's all we really know.
I believe this kind of work, this kind of research is probably beyond the scope of our staff and our committee members, unless it's someone's avocational or related to their day job and they feel comfortable taking it on. Or perhaps we could solicit interest from some of the many nonprofits in the area that might relate to their mission. But otherwise, unless there's some pro bono out there like that, I think it needs to go to a consultant.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, I would like to suggest at least that we ask the Central Virginia History Group and also the genealogical group that meets at Jefferson School and Lynn Rainville, who's done a lot of work with cemeteries, because they just may know of some names, particularly because of the Gilmers, were fairly prominent around here and had other family members. So they just may have some ideas. It seems like it's worth doing that before you bring in a whole consultant.
Yeah, and I have
one would, unless someone like that or one of those organizations would do it, then I think to get it done in an expeditious way, we would need to hire someone to do it.
I have been in touch with Lynn and others, and I know Margaret. Sorry. So I have talked to quite a few folks, and it tends to be a lot of, well, what you need to do and what you need to do, and so that's where it gets to. Is that best done by us or done by a consultant? But I'm sorry, Margaret, you were.
Yeah, I was just going to say that there certainly is material that we have at the Historical Society that potentially could give some leads about names. And I would be willing to take a look at that, both things about Penn Park and about these families. And then re-looking at your Chancery list, I looked at that soon after you sent it out, but I hadn't taken a close look again since that time. But I could take a look at some of those things to see if something suggests itself from names and otherwise.
Jeff, I just wondered, is there any funding request or discussion attached to this discussion, or is this simply just kind of an update, or is there?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, we do have fun. Well, you all, the committee, have funds that can be used if that seems, something to pursue. I mean, it's at your discretion. So, and it probably could be something small enough that if there's someone that would recommend working with, we could contact. I mean, that's an option. I know that it was done at Monticello. I know that I think Tom Chapman even was involved in some of the work at Montpelier, so they're familiar with it. But it really is, it's an interest. I will say I've gotten lots of spreadsheets from Shelley, and then she's in a larger genealogical network, and I've gotten some information from them. But it's daunting. I mean, it's kind of interesting, fascinating, but we're talking a 100-year span of time, and trying to figure out, whether this Polly is that Polly, and this 8-year-old child is the 28-year-old child. Yeah. So,
Jeff, why would this come out of our pot of money and not out of parks?
well, I mean, that's
They have,
something.
not that anyone's rolling in cash at the moment, but they certainly have a larger budget than we do, and the information will be used by them to determine the extent of the usable area and the extent of the protected area. And even in terms of interpretation, it seems like that would enhance Parks and Rec mission. So I'd like that to be explored, because we have a very limited budget.
One question I would ask too, and this may be for discussion later since Jelane's not here, but if I know that the Mellon grant was looking, like the people who were organizing that were looking at descendant engagement as part of that, and I'm wondering if this could be a connected effort, or if the organizers of that grant would be interested in tying this in. I have no idea. But also, in order to do that, we'd kind of have to, somebody would kind of have to scope the effort in order to, figure out what money to ask for, which I think is related to what Jordy was asking too. So just some thoughts for the group.
Quick question to Jeff. The burial sites, are they on the 4 sides of the cemetery?
No.
Or are they on 2 sides of the cemetery?
They're predominantly on the eastern side. There are a couple of anomalies. There's one on the north end, right outside of the Gilmer Wall, and there's 2 kind of down in the woods from the entrance into the to the Hotop section. They're being interpreted. This is one of the difficulties in this, is we are interpreting those as graves based on the information that from the archaeologist and from the geotechnical folks and their experience. They are interpreting these as graves. They may not be, but the only way to determine that would be to have as you've seen them at these sites where they pull that soil back and are able to determine, is that a burial shaft or is something else. The other piece of this that still bothers me is that if you look at the old photographs, the area that was not cultivated, particularly on the northeast side, it's larger than the area in which the GPR detected burials, or that burials were interpreted. And so it just keeps gnawing at me that there's more there. But the fact remains is that we at least know an area that we have set aside and not touched. So that's some of the the extent of the burials we may not know. They simply may not be, there may not be enough there for the GPR to detect. But yes, they're all predominantly on the east side. Nothing was interpreted on the west side, which is the entrances to the Gilmer and Craven section.
Jeff,
Because I
is the
saw
site at,
indentations
go-
on the north south sides.
I'm sorry, what's that?
I saw indentations on the north and the south sides.
There's on the very northwest corner, there's a clear indentation or depression.
Right.
And it was interpreted as a burial. But that's the only one that, so there's the physical observations, there's the GPR, the various layers of it. They thought they had, when we were out there that day in July, they thought they had detected some on the west side, but they haven't interpreted them as such. But they are predominantly, it looks like 3 rows on that outside that eastern wall.
Gotcha.
Jeff, do you think the site is adequately protected at this time?
In terms of protected, I mean, no one's digging out there except the groundhogs, and my God, I don't know if you all remember, we got a call, what was it, Robert, late spring, a woman believed she had found a bone out there, and we even had it examined by the state police forensics folks. It wasn't, but yeah, but as far as disturbing the site, nothing's going to be done there. It is working with parks. I don't know if they've done this, but they know the area is to be left untouched. But people can walk on it just like they can walk in any cemetery.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead, Dee Dee.
Just real quickly, I mean, it seems pretty clear that we're never going to be able to identify a person in even how, the names of the people whose burials we can detect. And there's many more enslaved people than there are been detected grave sites. So I think we're really talking about interpreting that time, or, in some way of sort of a more broad interpretation. And I think it's a good opportunity, because we do have other parks, and a lot of people have other parks that might potentially have the same situation, to develop a plan that is manageable and can be replicated, sort of without going sort of beyond the scope of what is even possible to interpret. Thank you. That's my only thought.
And that is helpful. Thank you. The 2 things. One, we do have a site that has no sign or marker or anything. There's nothing interpretive there, and I think at some point in time it would be appropriate for something to be said or circulated about it, so that if people had questions. And the second piece about it, right? It's like, I mean, when I talk to these people that have done this, oh yes, we did that at Monticello. I mean, it's like somebody with a PhD who's come in and run that type of program. So that's sort of where we are. It's like all of us, even I think collectively, if we wanted to do this, even with all our other responsibilities, would find it very difficult. So it's I don't know. And then to the point about Jenny's question about Park and Recs, I mean, I can. It's sort of like a situation with Daughters of Zion Cemetery. It sort of got handed off, and but it got handed off to the preservers group. This needs, I would think, somebody like that, someone who is sort of step up to be the steward of that site and the steward of this plan. But I don't know. I feel like I'm not even at that. I mean, I'm at minus numbers. I'm not even at number 1 on the list yet. So, but I do think I need to spend some time talking to Tom, talking to the folks at Monticello, saying, what were your steps? What did you do? How can we maybe at least put together a game plan? Then I can say, this is what we think needs to be done. We're not saying we can do it. We're not saying we can afford to do it. We're saying this is what we believe needs to be done, and that's helpful to hear. But I'm not. I'm not hearing that you all want me to fire off all this data to sift through it, and I respect that. That's fine.
Yeah, I think it would be great if we could come up with, exactly as you say, a kind of phased steps whether, research, protection, interpretation, whatever they are. And if we can attach a kind of general order of magnitude idea about effort and cost associated with those steps, then I think we as a committee would be in a better position to identify appropriate ways that would be appropriate for us to support the effort. And it may be that there are pieces of it that we can take on, and other pieces, other, groups, agencies, individuals, or so on can take on. Does the city have a term contract that we could reach for, with an appropriate consultant for research or something like that? I mean, I don't think we're there yet, but I'm just.
Yeah, I asked Ben Ford, I said, because because we didn't do any physical archaeology out there, there's still money on that contract. And I said, is this something that you could help me, with the remainder of what that was, what he has available, some of this research, or even put together a research plan. And he actually said they're so busy right now that it's not something he could get to, or there's other, I guess, more lucrative things for them to do. But I can still ask Ben also what, who he would recommend we talk to. But as far as an expert, like I guess I wouldn't know. It's almost like a general contractor. We need the GC on this that comes in and knows who all the different people to talk to.
That's okay. I was just
Okay.
curious if they were, if we needed a consultant sooner rather than later, was there someone who was easy to reach rather than just putting an RFQ on the street? But I understand the answer may be no, or it may not even be appropriate to.
Yeah. So the
we don't even know what
archaeology,
kind of consultant we need.
right? Yeah, the city has, Ben Rivanna Archaeological has a term contract with the city, and then there are the three consultants that we deal with the architectural history, and Morale Calvian, Deb McLean, and the 106 group are the three that we currently work with. So 106 group might be qualified for something like this, but
Okay.
let's say we need a scope of work first. Okay, good, thanks.
Yes, thank you. Dee Dee, go ahead.
I want to look to how Liz Sargent and I think Steve Thompson too was involved with how they handled the Ivy Creek, because they're cultural landscape people. I mean, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a landscape, and that's their expertise. They donated oodles of time out to that project. But there too, you've got unmarked graves. It's not the same deal. They're not enslaved as far as we can tell. But there's a lot of interpretation being led by these people, and they're dealing with other professionals. So it's just another potential contact.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Still bummed that Steve has taken a job north. That was a great local resource. I know he's still accessible, but it's losing his constant involvement.
I know where he lives.
Rachel, I'd like to return to what you recommended, which seemed very reasonable to me. And I'm sure among us, we probably have a range of ideas on how this should happen and who should be involved. But I'd really like to see us prioritize this, because we have a lot of important work that needs to happen in the city. And I think we need to have a broader perspective and see what is most urgent that happens there, which perhaps has already happened, that it's been identified that there are human burials there, and that they probably are of the enslaved population that lived on that site or nearby, and that now Parks and Rec, that's the custodian, the steward of this site, knows that. So, maybe something in writing that we identify the area that's not to be disturbed without further investigation should come out of this, so that there's some result. And then other things are things that could be funded in the future, or they could be volunteer work that people want to do something pro bono. I just feel a little uncomfortable leaving it so open-ended.
Yeah.
I will tell you, so in the discussion I had with council that night, I think it was early December, the agreement seemed to be, that let's not disturb the site further. We know the area, we can protect that. There was adamant, don't disturb the site, but they very much wanted recommendations on how can we determine who these individuals were and are their descendants out there. So that was the clear direction or the clear request from council to me. So and Jenny, I agree. There may be a point at which we say we know the site's here. This is what we know, and really within our capacity, we've taken it as far as we can, and that's probably. That could be legitimate at some point in time to say to council, but I would still think they would say, all right, well, if this were to be done, what would the path be? Whether HRC takes it on or not. So I think I, as Rachel said, kind of approach this as, if we had all the resources in the world, what would be the way this is be done? What are the things that we can reasonably take on, what reasonably can't, and then and we can have that discussion and then make a recommendation to council.
Yeah, understanding that there'll be a logical sequence for what those steps are.
Right.
I think with this process, we have the ability and the opportunity to think about future processes. This is not going to be the last time that we discover remains that belong to those people who were enslaved here. The city has not, to my knowledge, historically taken a very proactive role, but more kind of along these lines, deemed other groups and subsidiaries kind of more relevant and more had more expertise within their ranks. And so, if I think that it might behoove us to set out in this discussion to think about a future process in this conversation. We don't have to get everything in line, but just think about best practices that we want to adopt for the future as these sites get discovered and as they start becoming more and more important to engage with descendant groups and think about interpretation and preservation as like a seamless sort of continuity.
We might want to partner with the county because they obviously are going to encounter this more than we are.
It's a and that's
a great idea.
Yeah, I mean,
I know you were on the webinar yesterday from Preservation Virginia about upcoming legislation. So hopefully there will be a funded position at DHR that will deal with cemeteries. I mean, we're not doing this, out in the wilderness all alone. It's something that's happening all over the state, and maybe the most influential thing we can do is, to lobby our representatives in Richmond to fund this position at DHR so that there's more support for this kind of activity and more guidance.
I actually have been was contacted by DHR 2 days ago about a cemetery question, and it was directed to me with the preface, well, you've been doing a lot of work on cemeteries, what do you think we ought to do? And I was like, I'm certainly not an expert, but it led me some conversations with Brett Gastinger, who's on the BAR, but with Nelson Bird Woltz, and they've been doing a lot of this cultural landscape evaluation of cemeteries. So there is growing interest in this, and I think DHR is recognizing, these are the questions that are coming. What we have here at Penn Park is, uniquely and at DOC are city-owned properties in which we have unmarked graves. There are other private burial sites in the city that we know about. I do not know of any slave burial sites. And in the county, of course, they're probably, we know they're not county-owned property that I'm familiar with, but certainly on a lot of private land. Fauquier County did an initiative several years ago, and it came out of this examination of these Black cemeteries of asking people to identify burial sites on their property and voluntarily providing GPS coordinates so that they could be mapped in GIS. And it was very successful, but it was it again took, I can't remember the woman's name. Jenny, you probably, many of you might even know her. But really she honchoed the thing and then sort of was the steward of that entire process. But I've often wondered if something like that might not be important for the city, but it's as you say, it's priorities. It's something to maybe think about as we're going through this comp plan review process. Maybe there's some things that we need to to add to the historic resources section that cover some of the things that are new. So, all right. I don't want to, this is helpful. I said, if anybody's curious about all the spreadsheets and names, I mean, if you want, I can circulate it. It is a puzzle. It is detective work. It just need a better detective than me. So
Or CVHR or the Historical Society, Daughters of Zion, others who are Shelley Murphy. I mean, those are individuals and groups that are intensely engaged in that kind of research.
it's what they're doing at DOZ. Spent a lot of time talking to them. Is they're establishing, and I don't know where they are in the process, but they're setting up a Facebook page, almost, in my understanding, like a virtual bulletin board. And Jenny, you remember, what was it in Danville a couple years ago? There was the gentleman that spoke that had that large cemetery in Richmond. He was the director or a curator there, and he said how, there aren't marked graves, but people know where they went. They'd say, we would walk into this area and the burial was here. So they tried to virtually identify where people might be buried. And I think that's what they're trying to do with DOZ. And something like that was a suggestion Morale Calbian had, is, maybe you need someone help with establish a web page for this site that people can interact with. So I don't know, lots of good ideas, and thank you for your input, and I'll keep putting this together.
I just think we need some balance on where we focus.
Yeah.
In committee and energy, unless somebody,
that's right,
another organization can take it on. I mean, unless you have funding for it. If it's your CPG project for next year and you decide that's what the priority is, otherwise it's probably beyond the scope of what anyone can do individually, unless they just choose to do that.
I mean, it is, there's, Robert and I have a finite amount of time. I mean, this is fascinating stuff. I mean, but we get a lot of questions from a lot of people. I get questions from people outside of the state, that I've been working with Richard Guy Wilson. He has been asking me a lot of questions about some of the older automobile dealerships in the city. So it's like, all right, well, how much time do I have to kind of figure out some of these questions? But yeah, I mean, this is the great part of this job is this fascinating. I mean, it's just volumes of stuff. Robert and I could get lost.
I think this is important.
Yeah.
I think this is important. For me personally, we know it's there. We've identified it. We're going to protect it. We know it's important that someone or somebody's research it at another date, and it would take a little bit more for me to put it at the top of the urgent list. Now that we've identified that, but I'd like those things to be tied up nicely and presented to council and done in a way so that no one ever comes in the future and thinks that they can disturb or develop that area, and that it's one of those we consider interpreting in some way, either individually or as a group of others. And I think Jordy makes a good point that at this point it's the only known enslaved burials that we have in the city, in city ownership. And so, maybe that moves it to the top of the list for some sort of interpretation.
Yeah. And I do also want to say too that, I mean, cemetery protection and stabilization and preservation and interpretation is a highly, as everyone on this call knows, a highly technical specialty, but we don't need to rewrite the rules and the process. There's a well-documented set of strategies and protection tools and all that's out there that we should reference. So we don't need to go too far down the rabbit hole coming up with a whole new way of managing this, stewarding it.
Yeah, I would say we have a, and I can circulate this as well. Lynette Stansgard was sort of, I actually did write the book on the things that Rachel was referring to, and in 2001, Park and Recs hired her to do a management study of the city cemeteries. I don't know to the extent that was implemented, but I mean, I'm putting on my old advocacy hat here, and maybe that's a role that we all can play. Is not in terms of us, doing things, but in saying, hey, city, you have these plans, you have these spaces. Are you preserving them? And that's been one of my concerns with Oakwood and Maplewood, that they're somewhat forgotten landscapes. Oakwood less so than Maplewood. Daughters of Zion. Most of it just looks like an open field. So there are things that the city could be doing, but it's not my job as city staff to be pestering the city to do it. So I think there's an advocacy role that the committee can play without getting into becoming the research associates for these projects. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, so thank you very much for that and for everyone's commentary and ideas. So let's go into our next item, which is coordinate a statement on the slave auction block site commemoration.
I just wanted to make that there's been a lot in the media. Certainly, we know last fall there was all the email flying around, really pointing a finger at the HRC that we failed to do this and failed to do that. And I thought it would be helpful to just today, for the record, and for anyone listening, kind of reiterate what happened last winter, and if you all had any questions on it. And I think I don't have it in front of me, but we did make a recommendation to council, or the committee made a recommendation to council that to consider a something temporary to acknowledge the slave auction site in Court Square. There's some ideas, some conceptual markers we talked about. In the following 2 weeks, there were subcommittee meetings held, and they were at the Gordon Ave Library, where members of the Senate community and made it very, very, very clear that they requested that nothing be done at that site, not even temporary, and their reasoning being temporary had a way of becoming permanent. And they requested that nothing be done there until a thorough discussion with the Senate community. And I think I had circulated that in the email, and we'd sort of, that's correct. We got to respect that. But then then everything kind of went off the tracks with COVID, and we weren't able to kind of codify that as a statement. But I just wanted to say that, and hopefully if the media is listening, but that's, that they understand that's where the Historic Resources Committee position has been what it has been on Court Square. So are there any?
And I just would say, I think that we did kind of raise that when we were addressing Mr. Allen's requests. I don't remember which meeting it was, but it's in the last couple of months, because that was certainly something that we felt like there was a timeline for, and we wanted to be thorough about it. I think it was 2 meetings ago where we did try to step through that timeline for the public's understanding. I think that obviously Dr. Schmidt can speak more to this.
Yeah, in meeting with the descendants, they basically told us, go big or go home. We're tired of little plaques that become permanent. I mean, because even that little thing in the ground, I mean, well, it was, a shift from before, and so go big or go home. And well, that takes more time. So as I've said before, I, with other folks, are in the process of applying to Mellon for a Monument Fund grant, and for the city's part in order to build up fulsome, memorial here for the slave auction block, which we would still do in consultation with the descendant community.
Yeah. And I think a third point too was that something that Jenny revealed in some research about the process for creating a sign. If we work with DHR to do one of those state signs, we do lose some control over the wording and the message that goes onto the sign. And it seemed like it was really important to our whole community that we do maintain some control over what that message is. So my understanding was that was sort of a third component of it as well.
And then the last piece is, that the Historic Resources Committee is a committee. It makes recommendations. It does have some actions that it takes, but that the decisions of whether or not to place something within the city right of way, or for example, approve the names of these honorary streets, that rests with City Council. The Historic Resources Committee does not veto or stop or halt these things. So it's just, again, so anyone that's listening, that's clear as well. So good. That's all I really wanted to just make sure we share with one another that idea, or what happened, and that, you know, I did see something in the Seville over the holidays where a little tiny piece about, but the Historic Resource Committee won't do XYZ. So that's what kind of prompted me to just say this statement. So that's all I had on that. And I think that serves its purpose.
Thank you very much for bringing that up. And I'm glad we did have the opportunity to speak all that out loud and reiterate the ideas behind the recommendation that we provided. Okay, so moving on to our next item, which follows logically with the conversation we just had, is the Mellon Foundation Monuments Project update. And I think that's for you, Jelaine.
This will be really quick. No update yet. I'll let you know when we hear back.
Sure. I know that Jelaine, in December, at the December meeting, you said that there was going to be a draft application completed by the end of the month. Did you, was there a draft that was
Not
finished?
all parts of it were, you know, so we're still pushing on that. Andrea had some grant reports that were due by the 31st, you know, so
yeah.
So
okay.
Not quite yet, but yeah, I will definitely circulate that as soon as we have it.
Thank you.
All right. Yep.
Great. Thanks, Jelaine. Okay, we're getting close to the end. Okay, so coordinating an agenda for the annual HRC meetings in February. So it looks like, Robert, you've said we'll have 2 back-to-back planning meetings.
Sure.
And we need to discuss priorities.
Yeah, I think, you know, there are so many different disparate projects that we're working on. And Jenny, a second ago, Jenny, a second ago, you were talking about just prioritizing these different initiatives. And I think that's something that we can really take advantage of for the February annual meetings. It'll be the dates of the meetings, they're on the agenda, but just to reiterate, it'll be February the 12th and February the 19th, both Fridays, and they'll be 11 to 1 on here as Zoom as usual. And I think it would be just really helpful to take a good chunk of time in the remaining minutes of today's meeting to lay out you know, how we really want to structure these meetings. Do we want to have thematic discussions? I know in the past, the committee has talked about going over the Blue Ribbon Commission recommendations and just kind of comparing them to our current activities. So in order to make sure that the February meetings run really efficiently and we think about things holistically, I think it would be good to kind of get a head start on organizing that today.
I have a question, and as the newbie on the committee, you all may already know the answer to this already, but especially in listening to Jeff talk earlier about sort of the number of kind of unknown resources or undocumented resources that are out there. Does the city have a single GIS type database which locates what we know? Is there a resource like that in the city?
Not GIS based. I've kind of over COVID, we have a bunch of historic surveys that are organized pretty well in a Laserfiche archive, and that's accessible from the city's website. And I was trying to figure out a way to geolocate them on the city's GIS webpage. But that's kind of a longer term project. But that's, you know, we have these historic surveys and then the city's existing kind of GIS interface, which might be being replaced in the near future.
So When I was on the county's Historic Resources Committee, one of the things that we did, and the committee volunteered to do chunks of it. Now, you know that the county doesn't have local historic districts, but it does have the National Register nominations and forms for those districts. And it was to take and assign to a specific tax map parcel number not just to list in the tax record, and you can see this on the county GIS. You can see, that it's that tax parcel has, the contributing structures are all listed. Smokehouse, barn, farmhouse, cemetery are listed on a property, but we have nothing of that. And it's unfortunate that the DHRs, the VCRIS is just not. I mean, I think they're moving towards that GIS coordination, but the past records just aren't coordinated. So it would really take a lot of these old, again, the National Register listings and go through them address by address and assign those to a GIS field.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my point of bringing that up is just to ask if there was some kind of master list or large view of what the resources were, whether they're National Register listed or locally known. I mean, we've talked about all these sites that are just kind of hidden in plain sight, and whether there's a general prioritization of the stabilization or protection or interpretation that we might want to tick our way through, short term, long term, whatever. So that's just a question.
If I can just piggyback on that, one of the things, and it was Robert and I, when we went home last March, I said, all right, let's tackle this, this Rosetta Stone list of all the city's resources, because there are several spreadsheets, and I will admit to you, I made a mistake in sorting one of the lists. I somehow deleted 6s from the entire list, and it wasn't until 2 days later I realized that. So it was a bit of a setback, but we have the list. They're just sort of there's a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit over there. But what we were discussing, we've just completed these surveys, 10th and Page, Rose Hill. We do have the Fifeville. We have, the city has done a lot in what I'm concerned about, the African American sites. And I think the idea of historic districts, that's a really heavy lift. I know from past experience, the city, that they get a lot of pushback, but there are sites that we could, I think it would be helpful to identify what are these sites that are important, that aren't on Park Street. What are the sites very important within 10th and Page, particularly, and try to focus in on maybe, if not district designation, maybe there are opportunities for individual listings. So I put that out there as sort of part of your discussion of, we had the inventories, but what are the steps that we should take as far as trying to recognize and then seek some preservation of those sites? So put that as an idea to think about when we had the discussion on the 12th. Sorry.
Right. Yeah, because I understand there's a list of ongoing projects which are important for us to tackle. The Court Square markers, the Vinegar Hill Park, I mean, all these things. But I'm just, I guess I'm trying to understand what's the umbrella of sites and processes and priorities for protecting and interpreting, the whole kit caboodle of sites. So anyway, I understand where we are now. Does anyone else have additional topics, priority subjects they want to make sure that we cover in February?
One thing I wanted to bring up is just a discussion of, so many of our projects are on hold because of the COVID futures, which are completely uncertain, but just a kind of discussion of like, what is deprioritized because of the public health hazards and what is, you know, I don't know, just some discussion of that seems like it might be productive.
I think that's great. And also slightly different, but I think it would be good to just review subcommittee membership and makeup. Are there any other subcommittees that might be needed or that could be shifted? And especially since we have new members of the committee, are there any that would like to join? And also different ways that they might be able to meet before the public health crisis ends.
And I'd like to just explore a discussion about different ways to interpret. And we have such an old-fashioned way that we do this, whether it's brochures or markers or all this physical stuff. And really, you know, what are our opportunities? And I'd like an update, Jeff and Robert, about where tourism is at this point, because some of this was focused under tourism, like that downtown map. And now apparently they're not going to be in their building anymore. And kind of what that, at least according to the newspaper, you can
I'm on the CACVB, so I will say that the intention is that there still will be quite a presence from the Visitors Bureau downtown. They are going to be going to a mobile model for the near future and just using some away from the downtown area, just space just for office use only. But I anticipate that mobile unit will have a dominant presence, and I anticipate we'll also have kiosks available for things like maps. And so I just wanted to kind of weigh in on that. Yes, they are not going to be in the downtown transit center anymore, but there certainly is going to continue to be a presence in the downtown area. And I think this is a really good kind of partnership that we can continue to have with them and whatever, and in the direction that they're going. So I just wanted to weigh in.
Thank you. That's actually very helpful. And as those plans solidify, I think it'll be important for this group to know that, so we know what options we have to tie into it. But really, my point was just being is really, let's explore different ways, or you know, whatever spectrum of ways of interpreting are. Thank you.
And Robert, I feel like at one point, and I'm sorry, my brain is not remembering, but did I put you and Courtney in the same email to kind of make a connection there, their director? Maybe I didn't.
We did hear from them.
Yeah,
and they seem to be inclined to kind of pursue a separate path relative to the maps. Maybe this is an unfair word, but they seemed impatient that that we did not have available a walking tour map, and that we were not in, you know, anytime soon going to provide
but
one.
I think when we get to that point, there's certainly a desire to do some things concurrently and in partnership. Yeah, I'm sure that, you know, time frame is a factor, but that's the impression that I've gotten, and a willingness to kind of help us facilitate that.
So Jeff, that would be important to have as part of that discussion, is what is tourism thinking? And really, do we need to be thinking in terms of, do we want to partner with them? Do we not? Do we? And if so, we might want to be talking to them more directly. So that'll be important.
Yes, Jenny.
Yeah.
One of the things I've always wanted us to do, and we've never gotten to it, is to do, you know, what in the trade we would call theme and context studies. And again, that's not something that we can really undertake without professional assistance, but I think we could initiate it because we're kind of scattershot about what we interpret and when. And I know that I think we would all agree that we want to concentrate on what and who has been underrepresented and misrepresented or even excluded in the past. But I think if we had some kind of organization about those themes and contexts and tied them to physical locations as well, to the extent that we could, it would be really helpful, being cognizant that something new will always come up and we need to accommodate how it gets inserted, but we could have some priority about periods and of time and groups of people and individuals that we want to address.
Yep.
I know the county did a very similar thing recently, so that would be nice to have a city component, complement. I know Dee Dee, Clay, and I started really working on that for the walking tour, so that could serve as just a beginning kind of framework that we could just add to.
All right, so we being Robert and I are just make sure or is that something someone can research and report on? I mean, remember, county has someone specifically hired to coordinate and work on these sort of projects. That's not where Robert and I are. We're partially there, but we're not. Our resource and time is not allocated specifically to these matters. So, just if there's something that is an example that you all would like us to, or someone would like us to take a look at it, then please volunteer, if you will.
Jordy, was that series project that you were just referring to? It sounds interesting.
To my knowledge, I think Siri consulted, but I learned about that through Liz Russell. So through the Historic Preservation Committee there. But I think, yeah, Siri certainly has been a part of that. It's broader than just, Black representation in public markers or spaces, but also looking at gender equity and also, underrepresented elements and other components too. So yeah, Liz Russell has been kind of my point of contact around that.
That's interesting. The other thing that, and I do think we should pursue, we don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. What we also really, I think, need to be more aware of all the other efforts that are happening around town. Again, just duplication of efforts and really tying in what we can offer. But we do need to keep in mind that we might have some more immediate opportunities, like when the code building opens in the Vinegar Hill Park. So it could be that we need to focus our attentions one place first, if maybe, but that could be a point of discussion too.
Right. Okay.
So I want to offer two things. One, we have talked about funds, and just so you all know, the Historic Resources Committee fund, which is separated out for use by the Historic Resources Committee, or as some people say, the Historic Resources Task Force, which creates some confusion because that's what some people still have us down as. But we've got right now, and there's some variation in this because there's still things that are being closed out from prior historic surveys, but we at a minimum have about $42,000 available for the committee to use. That's a lot of money. And yes, some of it's been allocated to, but I mean, that accounts for what's been encumbered. So, and so I'm saying we have resources available. I think some of it we've kind of programmed for the Court Square markers. We know that the money was not allocated to the committee for the work at Vinegar Hill, the park, the posters the signage and markers. So I just, there are funds available, and the concern has always been that funds not used become available. People start to ask, well, what are you doing with it? So I'm not saying let's go spend money, but you do have resources available. And to Jenny's point, I don't know if a consultant or a moderator, I don't know if that would help to get to these the themes and the contexts and the ideas. I don't know. That you all have this is your opportunity to take this where you wish, but you do have money.
Let's put that on the agenda as well to discuss how we might be interested in spending some of that funding, prioritizing that. Okay. Well, I would say, I've got a list A through I here of topics that we can discuss next month. So if other people have additional thoughts, they come to you in the next few weeks, definitely let us know and we'll organize that on the agenda. unless Jeff and Robert have anything else for that topic, then we are at the last item of our agenda, which is announcements. Yes, Dee Dee.
Yeah, I don't think I knew this. It might have happened by our last meeting, but we had talked about Jackson P. Burley being placed on the National Register. The Riverview Farm at Ivy Creek has been too.
Right.
I think we were awaiting that, and it's a really incredibly important step along the way. And while that is city-owned, it's jointly owned by the city and county. So I want to keep hammering that out. And the restoration of the farmhouse is proceeding, which is going to be an interpretive site.
Great. That's wonderful news.
Yeah, I mean, it's very exciting. And while it's not a city thing, the Albemarle Training School marker is going up very
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Great.
Yeah, it was a little bit of we knew that the Burley had come in, but it was on, I'm checking the National Register's daily listing, and all right, well, where's the farm? And so it was a lot of angst of like, did it get lost in the shuffle? But so a lot of emails were flying around, and so yeah, that thrilled to have that happen. On Burley, I'm talking to Jimmy Hollins and the folks at the county. A lot of interest in doing signage, and I think Robert, you guys discussed this in December, but I have offered that the small signs that say this, Jackson P. Burley is on the Virginia Landmarks Register and on the National Register is something that I would be comfortable, coordinating and taking care of. But as far as a larger marker, I'm going to turn that over to, I'm going to talk to Siri, and I've been talking to the folks at the county school board who want to do something, kind of give that to them. But in talking to Jimmy Hollins, he said, really wants to, he said, I'm no hurry, because he wants to have a celebration when people can be there. So, but I am working on a plan for that.
Okay. Great, thank you. Anybody else have anything else upcoming or anything that they need or want to announce?
Just two things, so that you all are aware. The county and the city are working together on the joint court expansion project, which will require the demolition of the 1980s annex on the back of the Levy building, and the BAR approved that selective demolition in December. During that discussion, I was asking for some archaeology to be done. Most of the paved area up there in that entire block, if it's paved, had been open as the city's battery for a long time. So I was asking, and I think they are willing to do a phase one archaeological, evaluation of the site. That doesn't mean it's kind of pointless to look at where they demolished the building, but those parking areas that'll be pulled up. But in my research to kind of make the argument for archaeology, and fortunately some of the BAR members like Jody Alejandro were actually very critical that the not to us, but that the applicants weren't immediately considering some sort of archaeology on a site like this. So that was good to hear. But because of some of the work that you all had done in the file about Court Square, I found that John Jewett Sr., who owned the Swan Tavern and father of Jack Jewett, was buried behind the tavern. We know in 1802 he was buried there. We know through the 19th century there were reports of somebody ought to put a stone on his grave, and even into this or last century, there are reports of people knew where the grave was. And so I was able to say to them, not only do we want you to do some archaeology, but Mr. Jewett may still be on the site. So it'll be interesting how that progresses. I know I'm getting teased by everybody since my bypass days of, gee, Jeff, you seem to find dead people. But yeah, so it does appear we have something a little more interesting than buttons and broken bottles over there. But
great, thank you for that. Okay. Oh, sorry, dog barking. Yes, Jenny.
I'm not that excited about finding Mr. Jewett, but I am excited about you talking about archaeology for a major construction site where there's going to be demolition. And I would certainly be very supportive of this committee weighing in, because we've certainly missed some good opportunities in the past. And as we're more interested in our pre-1865 and actually through the 19th century, through Jim Crow, those eras, and we don't have a lot of good resources, the land really could reveal a lot of information. So I would very much like to see you pursue some sort of pre-demolition, pre-construction for these sites, and maybe that ties into what we do next month in our meetings about identifying sites like that.
Yeah.
I think we've lost a lot of good opportunities in the past, and places like Alexandria have had exemplary programs of city archaeology. I'm not suggesting the city undertake its own archaeology program, but I do think it's a place where we've been remiss, and we haven't had guidance, and we haven't had any regulations in that area. Since most construction is really pretty substantial these days. I mean, they are bringing in professional expertise. I think archaeology should be part of it. So I'd love to see that. And I leave Mr. Jewett to you.
Yeah, I wonder,
What's left of them?
Jenny, if there's,
I really don't care.
since the update for the comp plan and the associated code is being written, I wonder if that is an opportunity to insert something like what you're talking about,
Right.
and to codify it in these new documents.
Right.
That's what's
Anyway.
necessary, because what I
Yeah.
learned, Mary Joy, I went back through where she has requested archaeology, and the BAR has on some projects recommended and requested, but I was informed that the BAR may not require archaeology as a condition of approval. So that's,
Right.
we're sort of stuck. So we can bring it up as a question and a recommendation. Now, what the BAR could do is say, because your application does not propose this, we're going to deny it. But it's a difficult discussion going on internally right now, but the BAR cannot at the meeting say, we want you to do this, and if you do this, it'll be a condition of our approval. So
Right.
I
So
agree
we
with you,
can-
Jenny.
We might
Yep.
be able to condition it in an SUP or something, but that again
Right,
would have to be
right,
discussed with
Yeah.
legal. And but we're getting to that point where we should
Yeah.
Mhm.
address that.
I think that's a good idea. Okay. All right. Well, it sounds to me like we've wrapped up what we need to do today. And I will work more closely with Robert and Jeff to formalize our agenda for February. And I hope people will continue to write us an email with additional information or thoughts if things occur to you in the next few weeks about topics that we need to cover. And unless anyone else has anything to add, I think we can wrap up for today, given we've got double duty next month. Are we good?
I
All
moved.
right. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, staff.
Good to see
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.